Do I think the United States is as bad as Russia? God, no. But we certainly have a president right now who is making a hell of a run at it. Welcome to Signal Fire. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Signal Fire. I'm Lisa Senecal.
And I'm John Zieger.
Great to see you today, John.
Good to see you as well. How's it going?
Well, for me personally, things are good. I can't say that the state of the larger world has improved a tremendous amount since the last time we talked. How about you?
Yeah, no, you were not persuaded by the president's primetime address the other day that all is well in the world.
I was equally as persuaded as the markets were. I think I have
Fair
the
enough.
same confidence in him that dropped the Dow. What was it? Opened 600 points lower the morning after he gave his very reassuring 19 minutes of repetitive remarks. I don't know. I think it always makes everybody feel a little bit better when the president goes on national television and says that he's going to bomb somebody back to the Stone Age. Because it's so presidential and reassuring.
Yeah, and humane. It's it was something. I've heard it described as an extended Truth Social bleat or whatever, it had a quality. In fact, I think it was in many ways it was precisely that. Actually, it was the actual text of a number of his Truth Social posts, just kind of reified in his person,
jammed together
behind the podium. So we were kicking this around and thought maybe we'd spend a few minutes today on Iran. In some ways, the theme that links Iran with a lot of other things that has happened in this administration, particularly around Trump's relationship with Russia. I think
Putin probably enjoyed the remarks.
True enough. Yeah, there was one fan of that speech. If you were sitting in the Kremlin, you could scarcely have ordered up a better month than the last month. And I thought we might sort of talk a little bit about why that is. I don't know. What's your sense of Vladimir Putin's reaction and why he has it?
It's been a good time to be a Russian autocrat and probably an oligarch as well. Haven't heard any of them falling out of windows recently, so it's always a good day when you don't accidentally fall out of a window when you're a Russian oligarch. But I think Putin, he's just has a little wish list coming true right now. Trump is attacking NATO more aggressively than he ever has before. He is lifting sanctions on Russian oil at a time that they desperately need to be able to sell their oil so they can replenish their war coffers. We're pushing our NATO allies not just away from us defensively, but this is just building on the economic alienation that Trump has been apparently working on for more than a year now, ever since he got back in office with the insanity of the tariffs. And we have a new 100% tariff. I don't remember if that was last night or this morning. It all kind of blurs together, but we've now got massive tariffs on pharmaceuticals coming in from outside the United States, which I don't think that ultimately is going to help us with the costs. And the fabric of American society just continues to feel like it is unraveling, splintering with the bizarre actions that the president is taking in one place around the world after another that don't seem to benefit anyone in the United States, and only in a lot of different ways really hurting people, including that they now want $1.5 trillion?
$1.5 trillion defense budget. Yeah, let's go through. Let's go through some of that in a little more detail, because I think it's super important, right? The whole framework of peace and stability in the world that we have, with some meaningful exceptions, enjoyed since the end of the Second World War is to a substantial degree the product of the alliance system upon which NATO has been constructed, or NATO is the foundation, I should say, of the alliance system. That alliance system has resulted in the United States bearing the lion's share of the defense costs for much of the developed world in exchange for being at the center of world power relationships. So we have hegemony, not just in our part of the world, but really in Europe. We have major bases throughout Europe, throughout to a substantial degree throughout the Middle East, throughout Asia, and NATO is important to all of that. Less so, obviously, Asia directly, but it is part of the broader alliance system that allows us to control access to sea lanes, access to markets, and other things that are essential for us. So that has been we've enjoyed that system. It's been costly to the United States, but it's been a cost that we have explicitly chosen to bear. We designed and built that system, and it's benefited us enormously. And there was a serious question about the speech that he gave the other night as to whether he would be pulling out of NATO in that speech. Mm-hmm. Now, in the end, the speech was a kind of a nothing burger, a kind of extended Truth Social rant. But serious people, including our European allies, were concerned that he was going to pull out of NATO during that speech. He didn't, but what he did do, and has been kind of signaling in all kinds of silly Trumpian ways, as has Pete Hegseth, is that we probably would not stand behind the core commitment that we have to NATO. And it's been phrased as, well, we know they wouldn't stand behind us, so maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. Effectively, it is not exactly those words, but that's clearly the import of it, right? It's a constant criticism, very, very aggressive. Now, of course, the reality is NATO, the Article 5 part of NATO, has only been invoked once when the United States was attacked on 9/11. NATO has gone to war on our behalf. Our allies have gone to war in every major conflict that the United States is engaged in, going back to Korea, which was the first war or police action, but effectively war that we had since NATO was put in place. So NATO has been absolutely critical to us. The sons and daughters of our allies are buried in the soil of every place where we have fought a war, since the Second World War. So the idea that they have not come to our aid is crazy. But Trump continues to undermine it. He's been undermining it daily in connection with Iran, and of course in connection with Ukraine as well. It's easy to kind of joke about it, but like it's an incredibly significant thing for U.S. security and world security.
I can't think of anything more significant. Whether we're in NATO or not, if we are signaling that we might not come to the aid, we might not have any regard any longer for Article 5, then that is as good as not being in NATO. That already accomplishes so much of what Vladimir Putin has wanted for the longest time. For European NATO members to not know whether or not they can count on the United States anymore. And without the United States, NATO will still exist. It would still be an alliance, but it would be a dramatically weakened alliance and would make any of the ambitions that many, many people fear Putin and Russia have to go well beyond Ukraine. And it's not that people are just making this stuff up. Putin's been pretty clear. He doesn't keep it a secret that he thinks that he should be able to reconstitute the Soviet Union. Ukraine is just one step. The other issue with Article 5 is an attack on one is an attack on all. So that we would come to the defense of a NATO ally as they came to our defense on 9/11, as you said. Trump being angry that he started a war in Iran with Israel, had no conversations prior to that, did not build a NATO coalition as we have done in the past, didn't consult at all with our NATO allies, got in there, has made a mess. Strait of Hormuz is closed. Initially, he was going to have the U.S. Navy was going to be escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. That went away when he realized this is a hell of a lot more difficult than he thought it was going to be. And so he decided this was NATO's problem, that anybody who cares about the oil being able to get through the Strait of Hormuz, that's their problem. In his deluded mind, he thinks somehow that oil is separate from that's a separate oil market from the oil market that the United States is in, which we can talk about commodities and why that's insane that you can't say the United States doesn't need that oil. But you can't say that we've now seen that our NATO allies will not respect Article 5 and come to our aid when we are attacked, because we weren't attacked.
Yeah.
We were not attacked. We were attacked on 9/11. That was on our soil. We at great effort and expense went to Iran to attack them while we were still in active negotiations with them to attempt to get back to where we were before Trump walked away from the JCPOA that was working. And now he's just trying to get back there again. And this is a massive self-inflicted wound that we all now have to deal with.
The very best I think we can hope for now is that we could get back to some sort of an agreement for Iran not to pursue nuclear weapons, which was precisely what we had in the JCPOA. We had, thousands of monitoring visits there. There were all kinds of ways to help ensure Iran's compliance with the JCPOA and the idea that they would not pursue nuclear weapons or military use of nuclear technology. Trump tore that up, and for various reasons, that it was naive, that it was some sort of kind of bleeding heart thing. And in fact, it's the very best that we would be able to get at this point. And it seems quite unlikely, given what we have done, that we will get that. Now, the reality is we've destroyed a lot of Iranian infrastructure and other things. So in some ways, they are set back in different ways. But of course, they'll be resupplied now, right? They'll be resupplied by the Chinese, by the North Koreans. They have a variety of other relationships throughout the world and throughout the region. It's true that we can destroy their infrastructure, but it's a country of vast country, right? 3 times the size of Texas, 93 million people, lots of very smart people, lots of ways to get in and out of the country. Yep. And so there's no way that you can long-term prevent them from doing that other than having some sort of an agreement and some sort of monitoring regime in place. And of course, that has now, he tore that up. So this is a really important thing to remind people. Let's talk about oil because I think this is a fascinating thing. One would really wonder how it would be, if you set out to create a blunder here, if you set out to cause the opposite of the effects that you thought you were going to, it'd be difficult to do more. So on the Russia side of this, Russia, as you know, Lisa, has been sanctioned since they invaded Ukraine. And there have been a series of sanctions there that have tried to prevent Russia from shipping most of their oil on to the international market. They still, I think, move a bunch of liquid natural gas and other things, but still it's severely restricted their ability to sell on the international market. That has really damaged Russia's economy very significantly. And although it has not changed the course of the war, it has made it harder and more costly for them to prosecute that war one of the very first things that Trump did with the Iran war is remove sanctions on Russian oil so that Russia now can sell oil into the international market. That would be bad enough. That is the biggest hammer, the biggest piece of leverage the world has over Russia, are sanctions. And we gave them a gift of removing sanctions. But we did it at a time that the price of oil was skyrocketing. So, and moreover, skyrocketing, particularly in that region. Of course, it's a global market, but there's an enormous amount of demand in Asia for oil because most of the oil from Asia is coming through the Straits of Hormuz. Russia is a gas station in that neighborhood, and they are going to have the ability to sell at a price that today Brent crude is at a little over $112 a share, which is about a 35% increase from where we were a month ago. And that's just a gift on a silver platter. In fact, so much of a gift that the Russians were apparently planning to roll out a new tax because their economy is in such dire straits, and they have decided now to put that tax on hold because they don't need it because so much oil money is flooding into the country. So score one for Vladimir Putin, sort of against the world order, against Ukraine, against all of the efforts, the hard fought efforts to try to push back on Russia's aggressiveness and really murderous attack on Ukraine that continues to this day. But even more kind of absurd is that Iran also has been sanctioned. Iran also has been prevented from selling a bunch of oil. And what did the Trump administration do? They have now lifted sanctions on the sale of Iranian oil because the world market is starving for oil right now. And we are in the early days of that. Oil sits on great big ships. Those ships take a long time to get places. There's oil in tanks, but we're going to hit in the next few weeks. We're going to start to really hit across Asia, across a lot of the markets that supply us. Those tanks are going to be empty. There aren't going to be more new tankers pulling into the harbor, and that is going to ripple through the world economy in a big way. So that's the reason for lifting the sanctions. And in that narrow sense, it makes sense. The result is we are both expending American treasure and blood to the tune of $2 billion plus a day. I don't even think including the war material that's been blown up, like the $600 million AWACS plane and the F-15E that got shot down today and whatever else, right? So at least $2 billion a day, not to mention the more than 12 American lives, and forget about all the other civilian lives that have been lost, all of that. So we're doing all of that. And at the same time, we are funding the other side of this by lifting sanctions. I mean, if I told you this in advance, you would have said, even they can't be that stupid. And the answer is, give them a chance.
Yeah. Well, because in advance, if you had asked almost anyone, what will happen if we start bombing Iran? What are the things that they could do other than firing back? What are the things that they could do that could really have an impact on the United States and the world economy? What's a lever that they possess? Oh, the Strait of Hormuz. Like, it was the most predictable thing.
Right. The single most prominent feature of their geography. Right. The single most prominent feature of their geography. Right. Yeah, exactly. No.
Yeah. We all knew that this is what would happen, except apparently the people in the Trump administration making the decision to do this because they seemed legitimately shocked that this action that they were taking would very quickly have a negative impact on American citizens when they go to fill up their tanks. Or, man, I just had oil delivered here at my house. It's I was gobsmacked when I saw how much I paid for it. It's over $6 a gallon now.
Wow.
And it was like, geez, this is like the heating bill I usually get in January, and now I've got one of these in April. That's fun. And I have, 50% less that I purchased. It's just staggeringly inept, that that Trump couldn't have foreseen this, that I don't know if his advisors just won't tell him these things once he is hell-bent on doing something, because they'll get fired or they'll get screamed at, or whatever it is that they think is worth sticking around and keeping their mouths shut. That this was absolutely predictable, as was one of the things that Trump just sort of brushed off. And I can't wrap my head around this. Very early on in the fighting, we learned that Russia was providing basically targeting information to the Iranians, so that it would be easier for them to kill American personnel and destroy American assets. And Trump's reaction to that was basically, I mean, they're helping Iran, we're helping Ukraine. Like, people help people, and I can't really find fault in that. Like, these are American lives that are being lost. And to somehow equate that there is not a worldwide good in supporting the people of Ukraine. It just still, the value of human life and everything is just something that you trade, that you either have more of or less of, and it's not, it doesn't feel like it feels real to him. Like, the people coming back in caskets aren't real.
Trump started taking this thing back in 2016 or 2017, the Russia hoax, he would really work the ref on that thing, right? Where it became, it's the Russia hoax. Well, Russia, as you say, we have good reporting, and he is not even denied that Russia is helping the Iranians target U.S. troops. Now, we've had, I think, about a dozen people killed, but we've had hundreds injured and billions of dollars in material destroyed. So these are serious losses. Obviously, the loss of life would be serious in any event, but collectively, these are pretty serious losses. I mean, today we had an F-15 shot down. Maybe, I doubt that was related to Russia, but nevertheless, he has really nasty things to say about the UK, about France, about
Canada,
Spain, certainly about Canada, but just around the Iranian thing, he's been making a bunch of directed, but the one person you never hear him get up and say, Russia, you better stop, right? Russia, we see you. Yeah. Russia, we have a long memory. Russia, anything. It would be very difficult to find an example of anyone who he has been more deferential to. And whatever you think the reason for that is, I guess I would just ask, in what way is that in the interest of the United States of America, right? So maybe you think it's because he has an affinity for strongmen. Maybe you think he's just a super, clever operator, and he knows how to work. In what way could this possibly be in the interest of the United States? I don't think it could. The other interesting thing about Iran, I wonder if you have thoughts on, is the ostensible reason for us being in Iran was. It remains, I think, quite unclear. There are, in part because there have been a bunch of conflicting rationales given. One was that we needed to get rid of the nuclear material, but of course we were told that the nuclear program had been destroyed in June by our bombing mission that we undertook with the Israelis. So, there's a bit of a were you lying then or were you lying now kind of a thing. Let's assume that maybe that plays some part in it. I don't think we are bombing Fordo where the materials are supposed to be. So it's very unclear. Are we going to send troops in to get them? Who knows? I doubt it. So that seems unclear. Related is that they have they're developing these longer range missiles. And so we went in and bombed a bunch of their missile infrastructure. And that makes a little bit more sense, except that somebody else recently developed other long range missile capability.
Yeah.
And that somebody else is North Korea. And their long-range missiles can't just reach the region, which I think or being able to reach to southern Europe, which was, I think, the extent of what they anticipated the Iranians would have. Theirs can reach to the west coast of the United States, and
they have.
There hasn't been a word about that.
Yep, new ICBMs that not only shoot one missile at a time, but shoot missile that has the capability of having 5, 6 nuclear warheads on it at the same time that can then spread out and hit multiple targets all at the same time. And if this were in the hands of, Keir Starmer or just about anybody else other than Putin or Kim Jong-un, maybe it would not be as terrifying. But this is one of the most immoral, cruel, unstable leaders on the planet, if not the most. But apparently, because once upon a time he wrote a sweet letter to Donald Trump, and for Donald Trump to define something as sweet, it was just flattery.
Right.
Now apparently we can just completely ignore, and there has not been a mention from the Trump administration about North Korea's announcement that they now have this weapon capability. So we don't care about that. That's perfectly fine. We don't care that Russia is helping target Americans in Iran. I assume Russia is also assisting with targeting bases outside of Iran, and the other nation states that are in that area that are now on the hit list because of our actions. But it's it is difficult to imagine more, as you said, deferential treatment to a world leader than we see with Putin. And then there's Cuba, which we haven't talked about.
Cuba is a crazy story. Just to kind of catch folks up, if you haven't been following along with this, we started I think it's either earlier this year or the fourth quarter of last year.
Yeah, I think it was in December of last year.
A more or less complete blockade of Cuba. And as folks will know, Cuba is about 90 miles off the coast of Florida, so it's relatively close to the United States. It's easy for us to blockade. It's an island. And we have been preventing any oil in particular from getting into the country. And I think a variety of other supplies have also been embargoed. Cuba doesn't have energy of its own. Has a lot of, it's a very productive agricultural area, has some other things that it does have, but it does not have any domestic sources of energy. So it depends on Venezuela and Mexico for transshipment or for oil or for oil from other places. And the United States has cut that off. And as a result of that, there have been, vehicles are unable to drive. The power grid has gone down in a number of places. What little energy they have is being reserved for a limited number of kind of official uses. And there are horrendous stories of people dying on ventilators when the power cycles off, which it does, or just turns off because they run out of energy. Doctors in the neonatal ICU unit going because there's some time cycling between when the generators turn on or the battery systems turn on for a little bit, and having to physically sort of operate the machines in order to protect. So it's just
they're measuring the results already. Their infant mortality rate has gone up dramatically. So the best efforts that the medical community is attempting to make, it's not enough when
it's still resulting.
When
it's
you're
still
being
resulting in
like
death.
This.
And so we've been doing that unilaterally. Most American people will not have heard very much about this because it's not been the subject of any debate in Congress. The president has never spoken about it. It's not been the subject of any international debate at the United Nations or anything else. The United States, big country, has just decided, particularly I think in light of, I think Trump's very enamored by his ability to decapitate the government in Venezuela. And they have just thought, well, we're going to starve this country out, and it's got a lot of beachfront property. Anybody who has ever saw the Godfather, will kind of remember the Godfather series. Will remember all the casinos and before under the Batista regime, before Castro took over. It was a happening place. It was kind of like an extended Miami Beach, and I, as a guy with hotels in Florida, I'm sure Trump is very attracted by that in the way that he was about Gaza. The plan for Gaza is essentially to redevelop it as beachfront real estate for the world, which is sort of a really kind of gross thing. But in any event, so we're killing people in Cuba. We're massively damaging their economy because we are the most powerful country in the world, and they are one of the least powerful countries in the world, right, in our neighborhood. Nothing has particularly changed about the Cuban regime. It has not become more repressive. In fact, if anything, after it opened, people will remember that one of the achievements, the diplomatic achievements of the Obama administration late in their term, was a kind of reopening of Cuba. President Obama took a trip to Cuba. There had been a turnover in the government, and so it was the sense it was kind of a new day in Cuba. So there was some amount of commerce that was permitted. The sanctions were relaxed. They weren't entirely eliminated, but they were substantially relaxed. And Cuba began a kind of modest integration with the rest of the world economy in a way that it had not had since the early 1960s, when the U.S. first imposed its regime of sanctions. Again, nothing has changed. Trump just decided on his own, one man, presumably with some prodding from Marco Rubio, that he was going to do this thing. Well, that goes on. People are dying. People are suffering. There's all this stuff. And then the Russians say, we're sending a tanker.
Yep. We don't care. You have not told us it's okay. We know that this blockade is still in place, but here we come with our tanker filled with oil. And Trump's reaction, of course, was, damn it, Vladimir, I told you. The whole world knows you can't bring your tanker to Cuba. There's a blockade. No, that's not what he did. He said, I don't have a problem. He literally said, I don't have a problem with that. So, which then you have to ask yourself, what was the point of the cruelty? Why have we been torturing this island and letting their babies die and preventing people from being able to get their chemotherapy treatment, because all of these things take electricity and they generate it with oil. Their crops are dying in the field and they can't be harvested because they don't have the oil to be able to run the machinery. The hospital workers can't get to the hospitals because the buses no longer run and they don't have independent transportation to be able to get anywhere. And we were doing all of this so we could say we didn't care if Russia just decided to send oil there. Now it's perfectly fine for the island to get oil, I guess, because it's not from Venezuela.
It's an extraordinary thing. I mean, it really is incredible. And, there's a related thing, which apparently China has also announced now, a big aid package, but I think just financial aid, not oil. Yeah, I mean, in a way, this is kind of has a weird sort of echoes of the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? The Russians sending their ships with missiles and the kind of standoff. You're going to don't land those missiles there, and the Russians backing off. Well, in this case, it was Trump got to play the Nikita Khrushchev role, and he was the one who backed off, and so and this is tens of millions of barrels of oil. I mean, so this is a huge amount of oil. It's a very large tanker. So this will give them some meaningful lifeline, and who knows what comes from here. Presumably the Russians can send other ships if they want to. And so, you say sort of what is the point of the cruelty? I think this is one of when we think about the way that this war and this set of actions by Trump, because this is not directly the Iran war, but is impacting American power and America's role in the world relative to Russia and to China, probably more importantly to China. Mm-hmm. Part of it is that whatever one would say about the U.S., we had a brand. Let's call it that. Let's be sort of a little cynical and say we had a brand that was aspirational, right? That we were people who, by and large, believed in human rights, and we believed in the liberty of people. And yeah, there were a bunch of exceptions to that, and we could enumerate, some of them. And the CIA did some bad things in the 70s, and whatever. There's a lot of stuff that exceptions to that, but just on its face, we had a brand that was pro human rights and dignity and democracy and these kinds of things. And the brand of the United States today is of a hardcore bully, and a kind of capricious bully at that, right? And that is everything from tariffs, which, let's remind people, tariffs are an act of, these are acts of war, right? Blocking people's trade, making people's trade, crushing the trade of foreign countries is an act of war. It has been in the past. Blockades.
The devastation of USAID.
The devastation of USAID is a terrific example, right? Where all over the world, the investments of USAID were viewed as a kind of benevolence of the U.S. Of Americans, right? Whether that was food delivery or whether that was other medical care, other things, right? The logo of USAID, these kinds of things were incredibly important. They earned us enormous. Now that's all gone. Not only gone, but gone in a way that was capricious, that has resulted in with the good documentation that certainly hundreds of thousands at this point, probably approaching 1 million people, have died as a result of our just cruel cutoff of USAID. And then we get let's take it back to Iran for a second, where the president stands in front of the American people and the world and says we are going to bomb them back into the Stone Age. He's threatened to bomb their water plants, their desalinization plants, their energy infrastructure. By every version of understanding of international law and the laws of armed conflict, that's collective war punishment, crimes. and it's a war crime. We just blew up a big bridge in a relatively modern large bridge today in Iran. Now, maybe there was a military purpose to that. I'm sure there's always some military purpose to moving, but there's a kind of wanton cruelty. This idea, we are just going to hurt. We are going to smash you until you stop. Not smash your military, just smash you, Iran, until you stop. It's so awful. It's so to talk about people in these ways that do. No president in our lifetimes has talked about people, about war, about any of these kinds of things in this way. It's an extraordinary thing.
And other countries' leaders, like Russia's, when they do those kinds of things, they actually lie about it because they know because they know it's a war crime, because they know it is such a horrific thing to do to a civilian population. Putin doesn't come out and admit that he decimated the electric grid and power generation in Ukraine in the winter so that people would freeze to death, because he knows how that would look. But Trump will come out and he will say that we should do things like destroy Iran's ability to produce drinkable water for its people. So the brand of the United States, our brand, maybe not to Americans, because a lot of us have hope for us and know the good side of what America is and does and the potential of America. But in countries around the world, for citizens around the world, it is becoming more and more difficult to be able to point out the differences between the United States and Russia in the way that we are behaving, in the cruelty we're willing to inflict, in the aggression we're willing to take when we have not first been attacked, and when there isn't an imminent attack. Trump wanted us to believe that Iran getting missiles that could, nuclear armed missiles that could reach the United States, was an imminent threat. And that was why they had to go in when they did. He couldn't even get Tulsi Gabbard to go along with that when she was under oath and speaking to Congress. She would not say that there was an imminent threat to the United States. But we went over there and we're doing what we're doing. We've gone into Venezuela. We're killing people in Cuba. We've destroyed USAID. Do I think the United States is as bad as Russia? God, no. I don't. But we certainly have a president right now who is making a hell of a run at it.
I agreed. And I think the thing to keep in mind is if you think about the rest of the world, you and I sitting here as Americans, as people who love this country and have a sense of optimism for it, and we will see the good, and that's as it should be. But if you are sitting in sub-Saharan Africa, the fastest growing region of the world, if you are sitting in Southeast Asia, if you're sitting in other parts of the world, and you're looking not at the next, couple of years, but at the decades ahead, and say, where do we small countries want to align ourselves? Heck, if you're China, right? If you're China and you now recognize that your neighbor, the largest undefended border in the world, it now sits on the other side of someone who seriously threatens that we might take you over. You have to think about the United States differently, and you have to think about China differently, because China is the only real. Yeah. I mean, Russia is militarily powerful because it has a large nuclear arsenal. That's obviously it's a very extreme scenario, and outside of Europe, their ability to project conventional force is pretty limited, right? So, the real power that is the counterbalance to the United States is China, and importantly, China is also the second largest economy in the world, and on its way, the source of the most of the advanced manufacturing in the world, and just absolutely critical. So if you're Canada, if you're Nigeria, if you are any country in the world that is far-sighted, would you rather have a self-interested and maybe not values aligned, but stable China? Or would you rather have a cruel and mercurial America that is also grotesquely hypocritical, will stand on its high horse and prate about human rights, while at the same time, engaging in these kinds of activities, and of course, even now engaging in repression at home? These things become real choices for people, and I think we see with Canada as a good example, people starting to vote with their feet, starting to vote with their trade agreements, starting to vote with the kinds of doors they open up to other people.
These aren't decisions that these countries want to be making, right? Like they would like to have been able to continue to rely on the United States. It wasn't that they were looking for a reason to stop partnering with us and to no longer depend on us. And, China was there and they were like, yeah, the United States is great and they're doing all the things they've always done, but hey, look at China. That's not what was happening. Right. But we have made it impossible for countries economically to be able, and now militarily being able to count on us. Everywhere that the United States has been pulling out, they're the places that China has been going in and backfilling what the United States used to do. And those inroads that China has made, I have no love for the Chinese Communist Party. I think they do abhorrent things to their people. I think what they are doing to the Uyghurs is is so awful. It's hard. It's unspeakable. It's hard to talk about at all. But countries have to make decisions about how they can take care of their people. And that means they need to be able to have stability and growth. And when you have a country that you have counted on, like the United States, that has become completely unreliable, and a lot of these countries gave us a second chance. They thought after Trump was done his first term that the United States was righting the ship and we were going to be able to have, they were going to be able to have stable relationships with us again. And then we elected Trump a second time. We can't expect that when Trump is gone, that all of this comes back. Even if these countries wanted to immediately have the relationship with the United States that they did before, you can't just turn those things on and off. And why would they trust? What are they maybe going to get another 4 years out of the United States? And then what are we going to do?
I think that that point is just a critical one, because what it means is, going back to our North Korea and kind of Iran binary, what is the primary difference between North Korea and Iran? Well, I mean, you could probably argue it's a few things. Bibi Netanyahu, kind of egging Trump on. There's a variety of reasons why Iran, the Saudis and the Emiratis and the various regional folks who have him in their pocket. So there's some of that going on behind the scenes, undoubtedly. But the other difference is that North Korea has a nuclear weapon. And I think the takeaway from this for anybody who's looking is, if you do not want to have your leadership decapitated, if you do not want to, big countries to tangle with you, the one sure way to do it is to have a nuclear weapon. So that's kind of thing one. Thing two is, in a world without NATO, or where Article 5 of NATO is, as you say, kind of de facto maybe walked away from, or at least it's in doubt, the dependence that all the other NATO countries had on the U.S. nuclear umbrella becomes doubtful for them. So now all of a sudden they wonder, are we, when it starts raining, are we under the umbrella or are we not? Well, what happens under those circumstances? You build your own umbrella is the answer. Yeah. And maybe you build it with friends. And we saw, I think one of the most startling and underappreciated stories of the last year was the agreement among European powers that France, that the other countries in the EU would be under the French nuclear umbrella, which is a complete change from where we have been. And it's indicative of this idea that people are recognizing in very serious ways that the United States is not reliable, and they're going to have to shift for their own. And that is going to mean that we have a more dangerous world where there are more nuclear weapons in more places. I don't want to be too doom and gloom, but all of this is entirely preventable, right? If we simply honored our commitments. And we're not doing that. And maybe just to close, we sort of started with the Russia connection here, and maybe let's finish with it. I go back to 2016 and the election, the fact that Trump's unpaid campaign manager, Paul Manafort, was feeding information to the Russians. Russia, if you're listening, we'd love Hillary Clinton's documents, all of that, right? The reality is, there is no operation that the Russians could have pulled off, no military operation. There's nothing they could have done. If you said our great geostrategic foe is the United States and we want to weaken them, there is nothing they could have done more effectively than get Donald Trump elected. He has been a one-man wrecking ball to the United States.
Yeah, he is the gift that keeps on giving, if you are Russia. So to watch out for in the next week, one of probably many things, everybody keep their eye on what is happening with the desire of Trump to have a $1.5 trillion budget for the military added to the budget, and what where he is proposing to find a lot of that money, which is in social safety nets and things like childcare. And it is the antithesis of why he said people should vote for him. He was going to put America first. He was going to take care of the people, the forgotten man that was being ignored in the United States, that wasn't getting a break, didn't have a shot, that the elites didn't care about. And he was not going to engage in unnecessary foreign, he would call them apparently excursions. Yeah.
Golf trips.
And and now we're seeing exactly the opposite. And this is a place where we can actually have a real impact on contacting your members of Congress, being loud about this. These people are running for re-election, and they are going to be very susceptible to the pressure of their constituents if we inform ourselves and we get loud and tell them that, no, we're not going to accept cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and other elements of the social safety net, and give up on things like being able to provide assistance for childcare, because Trump has decided that the sole purpose of the federal government, and these are his words, not mine, is the military protection of the United States. That he has no other responsibility to the American people than that one thing.
Well, at the risk of another episode, we'll talk more about that again next time, because I think that is the scale of that number is extraordinary. It's a 50% increase over the budget. It's approaching 50% of the total discretionary spending of the United States government would be in defense at that point. It's an absolutely insane thing, and deserves a lot more discussion. Okay, we'll leave it there. Sorry, that was a kind of a bummer of an episode in a lot of ways. I feel bummed out now. I don't know.
But we have to talk about this stuff, and this is where we are. Yeah. We are here right now, and it's tough stuff to have to focus on, but not focusing on it does not change anything. And we can still change things, but we have to be committed to it.
Good point. All right, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We will be back next Wednesday and not be nearly as depressing as we were this week.
Promise.
Thank you for joining us.